Hello and welcome to February's WPLDN Meetup. Diane, Paul, Leo, thank you so much for joining me. How are we all doing? Lovely to see lots of little dancing going on there with the music.
Yeah, that's making me chuckle.
Behind the scenes.
Dance there.
Behind the scenes.
As I was saying, I think we've been in too long now, so.
Absolutely, and it's such a pleasure to be here with you and to be able to do this and come together in this way when we are all so cooped up and so stuck in.
Absolutely, and it'll be really good for you to tell us in the chat wherever you're watching this from, where you're watching, so we can put it up. If you do put your name in there, we will be putting your name up, so please be aware that filling in that we will put you up. And it'd be great to see where everybody is joining us from around the world, and I really do mean around the world.
It's absolutely fantastic, isn't it? I mean, we've seen this incredible international audience grow into WPLDN, and just this ability to have these. We were literally just talking about this in the social just now. This ability to come together as a global community in this format. It's really quite a special time, really, in that regard.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we've got Ben from Sweden. Ben, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Ooh, we got where are we? Oh, Yeovil, Somerset. Richard, welcome. Berlin.
And Herman from Berlin.
Pouring in. Excellent.
Which was the last in-person WordCamp Europe that it's weird to think that was the last WordCamp Europe that was was it 18 months ago? See, everything seems like about 10 years ago now. So
I think you're right. So it's going to be 2 years in the summer, around about June. It'll be June 2 years ago. So yes, you're right. 2 years ago.
Yep.
No, 18 months.
Yeah. It's
I think Tess had tweeted earlier on about the organising team for WordCamp Europe and the fact that they was. I think I could be entirely wrong, but I think it was 2 years since they were together doing a site visit for the upcoming WordCamp Europe. Yeah, what an event that was. I mean, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Whenever I think of Berlin, all I think about is Leo and his bicycle and how happy he was.
So for those that are wondering what this is, to explain, Berlin had the jump bikes, the self-hire electric bikes. The hotel we all stayed in was about a mile away from the venue. Certain people who will remain nameless above me were getting taxis, and I was getting the jump bike, and for €1 was beating them there each time. So, and I would say I was doing exercise, but if any of you have ridden a jump bike about 18 miles an hour, there's no exercise required, but it's a great thing.
Excellent. Okay, so cracking on with tonight, we've got two fantastic speakers lined up for you this evening. Really looking forward to inviting both of them on. A bit of a tongue twister, I find, Tom and Tim. We will go into a bit more detail in a moment. I just want to say a big thank you. These events are delivered by Big Orange Heart. The team behind Big Orange Heart are entirely voluntary, including Paul, Diane, Leo on camera with me right now, as well as a bunch of other people behind the scenes. So I just want to say a big thank you to all of the volunteers that collectively make up Big Orange Heart. But I just wanted to introduce your hosts for this evening. I'm Dan Maybe. I'm the founder of Big Orange Heart. I ran a digital agency in here in the UK, and generally kind of keep myself fairly busy doing this kind of thing. Paul, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Paul Smart. I run a small agency in South East London, Smart Digital, and also work on the Big Orange Heart fundraising team.
You do. Thank you very much. Diane, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Diane Wallace, and I'm a freelance web developer specializing custom WordPress plugins and themes. And I had to think about that for a minute. Can't remember what I do anymore.
And Leo, do you want to say hello?
Hi, yeah, I'm Leo. I'm the founder of Sotic. We're a digital sports agency that specializes in delivering sites to world governing bodies using WordPress.
Excellent, thank you, and thank you very much for contributing, giving your time to enable us to have this event. And speaking of contributing and helping to enable us to deliver this event, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. So let me just pull up a quick video. That'll be the wrong
That
one.
was quick.
Passionate about making the web a better place. Automatic.com. Your managed cloud hosting platform. Cloudways.com. Generate more leads for your digital agency. Funnelpacks.com. The WordPress multilingual plugin. Weglot.com. Tips, tricks and resources for people who use WordPress. WinningWP.com. The search engine optimization plugin for WordPress. Yoast.com. No one noticed, did they?
No.
No, not at all.
Slick as anything.
Please do help us to thank our sponsors. If you are out there right now watching this on either social or live.bigorangeheart.org, please open up your browser and hit big.ht/thanks. That'll put together a nice little tweet, which will automatically fill in the details for you to send a thank you out to all of our sponsors who are enabling us to be able to deliver Big Orange Heart, which in turn enables us to be able to deliver WPLDN. So thank you. Also want to say a big thank you to our supporters, Blue37, Smart Digital and Sotic, for giving time and enabling us to be able to be here this evening. So on to this evening. As I mentioned earlier, we've got two fantastic speakers, Tom and Tim. Tom is going to be talking to us about digital sustainability within WordPress, and Tim is going to be helping us clean up a hacked website using tools such as WP-CLI and the command line. Two very different talks at very different spectrums in terms of the content that we're talking about. But that's what WPLDN is all about, and that WordPress is it has such a wide breadth of skill and knowledge and expertise that it's really a great opportunity for people to come and share that expertise and experience. So we're putting out an appeal right now. If you are thinking of speaking, if you have something that you want to share with the community, WPLDN is a great opportunity to be able to come on and share that knowledge, share that experience with the community. Hit big.ht/speak. That will redirect you to our speaker registration page. On there, you can drop in some details and we will then get in contact with you and arrange to have you come and join us. We're looking for people of all skill levels. We're looking for experience speaking. Public speaking really doesn't matter. We want people that represent our community that can come and share their knowledge, their experience with us. Okay, but before we move on to our speakers this evening, we've got an opportunity for our community announcements. So this is, if you are aware of anything that's going on in and around the community, it's an opportunity for you to come and share that with us. If you are on live.bigorangeheart.org, and if you have anything to share with the community, drop it in the live chat there. We'll make sure we get it up on the screen. Just to be aware, as Leo mentioned, we will be displaying your name. It will just be your first name. We'll remove your surname. But do drop us any information into the chat and we'll be sure to share it with the wider community. Similarly, if you're on social, drop it in a comment and we'll try to make sure it gets included. Whilst we wait for any of those to come through, we've got a few things that we wanted to just cover off and discuss. So please do feel free to use that live chat. So virtual WPLDN. This time last year, so 1 year ago, was our last in-person event, the February meetup. That feels rather big. I don't know about you, how you're feeling about that, Paul, Diane, and Leo. But this, it's been a year already of delivering this style event.
Yeah, like I said, it's weird one because in a way it feels, longer, but parts of the year seemed so fast, but actually like when I think back to the last time we were all together, it seems such a long time ago, such a long time. And it kind of feels like it should have been sort of like more remarkable in some way at the time. Like, kind of like.
It is.
But,
It's just that unknown, isn't it? I mean, that we were having those conversations at the time about, how do we feel about coming together as a community in those early days, and obviously taking the decision fairly early on to stop delivering the in-person events. And obviously it was the right decision to make at the time.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's been some real gains. I think we've said this a few times. There's been some real gains, but I do admit, I think that especially now at this time of year, I think I quite miss the human contact. But I love how international we are now. I just kind of nationally as well and internationally. I love the fact that we have now regular attendees from all over the world, and I would love for us to keep that as we go forward. Like if we go back to in-person events, I'd love to keep that that element, somehow to have a kind of mixed virtual in-person event.
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
I think
that's come up in conversation a number of times, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It has, and that's something I would love to hear from you in the comments right now. This concept of the hybrid event, is that something that you want to see? We have been actively working towards it within WPLDN, and we want to ensure that we can keep that international community feel as we move forward. But we're very interested to hear what you think on it, and what do you have a vision for it yourselves, the community? How do you see that working? I had a funny thought the other day of I'm based in Colchester, which is an hour and a half, nearly 2 hours sometimes outside of the venues we would deliver WPLDN, and that idea of do I present remotely? How far do we take this this hybrid concept of delivering WPLDN?
I think that's a really interesting view. Is if you had asked people what they want going forward or going back, it's always about how to get better events and better environments. I've actually found that the learning experience online is actually better than it is in the room. So if we think about some of the experiences that we've had of when you're at a meetup or a WordCamp, you don't necessarily take in all the actual sessions. You obviously miss out. We're all missing out on the social elements, but the learning environment and the knowledge transfer from different people on a conference is actually, or on a conference like this, I could argue is actually better. We get more out of it.
Yeah.
Also, the archive we have now, the online archive that we have, because the kind of the broadcast quality, kind of is just a step above. As a piece of broadcast, it's much more polished and much more a whole contained, kind of like broadcast item. Whereas before, the broadcasting was kind of a bit of a, if you really can't make it, then we'll just film it. But it wasn't in the way that this is structured to work specifically as a piece of broadcast. So,
I think you're right. I think you're right, Diane. But being sitting at both ends of that focus of doing the in-person broadcasts and now this, I think hybrid is really difficult. It won't. If anybody's thinking that hybrid will give you the best of both worlds, it won't.
No.
I think we'll end up with, in everything else I'm dealing with, we'll end up with some meetups which are live in person to get that live in person experience, including the fact that when you're in the bar, you can walk away from Veto. And then the rest of the time, we'll have this sort of environment when you for doing the knowledge and the passing on the information and learning from people. As you've said, we've had unbelievable exposure to people around the world and to bring in people that we just couldn't have justified flying them into London. And it's been incredible what we've done. I mean, the only real waste of time was the stop motion video I did of how to get from the station to the venue, which I thought we'd use loads and loads to use, and we used it once.
I think that there's some really interesting comments coming in on the chat, so thank you very much. I think Robert's, here's something really interesting, the idea of doing a hybrid, but it's the pre-event is kind of the pre-in-person is the hybrid bit. So certainly a lot for us to discuss and consider as to how best we do this as we move forward. But I also appreciate we are rapidly running out of time.
Yes.
I think some of those comments very quickly, because we're not going to be able to copy and paste them fast enough.
No.
Elliot, who's trying my hardest to fill up every bit of my keyboard, meetups and localized. He's just saying it's virtual for international. I think he's got a really good point there. Chris has said, I think hybrid is a really great and give us access to a lot more people. I mean, we are tuned into a lot of very clever people when we have these on, and thank you for all your comments.
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on. Couple of things just wanted to mention. I did a very, very deep dive into what it took to deliver WordFest recently. This was a virtual event that had just shy of 2,500 attendees over a 24-hour period. If you are considering taking on a virtual conference of any form, there's a lot of stuff that I've gone into in here. There are times I've gone into it's been technical, it's been practical, but I also get personal in some of this. It is about a 30-minute read, depending on how fast you read. So as I say, it is a long, deep dive. Thankfully, Robert Jacoby has done a fantastic job of summarizing that great big long deep dive. I highly recommend taking a look at both, of course. But I just also wanted to mention Robert's morning coffee newsletter I just wanted to give it a really quick mention. If you haven't subscribed to it, I really recommend getting onto that. He is sharing some fantastic content, and it's in a really nice digestible format at the moment. So big thumbs up, Robert. Thank you.
I'd second that as well.
Robert did crib notes for your.
He did. Excellent. Okay, in the WordPress business side, we've got WP Feedback has been renamed. Our friend Vito, actually, as already mentioned, has changed the name of WP Feedback, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this because I just destroy names. Can anybody on the team pronounce this correctly?
I think it's Atarim. Is that right?
I think so. That's how I've been pronouncing it.
Yeah.
So do you know what the meaning of it is?
The literal Hebrew translation, yes.
Yeah, what is it?
So in the write-up, literal Hebrew translation is a website. According to the post that was put together in relation to the article talking about this. Excellent. Okay, we cannot go without mentioning this little delight again. It usually rears its ugly head, once or twice a year. Having said that, I think it's been a couple of years. I think 2018 was the last time we had a big discussion around this particular page, the WordPress.org hosting page. A company in the space has been found to be in breach, or there is some speculation as to whether they have breached the terms of the trademark in relation to the WordPress logo, the use of the WordPress logo. Again, in fact, Robert did a fantastic write-up on this, and I know that there were some questions that were asked over in the post status Slack specifically, and Matt actually responded to a number of these questions around this. And one of the questions I just wanted to I wanted to highlight, Matt's was in response to this kind of. There's been a lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of rumors and so on around this kind of, is it a pay-to-play type page? Are the companies that are featured on there, are they paying some sort of fee to feature there and to be highlighted? Because there is an expectation that page is going to drive considerable amounts of dollars into those companies. And Matt's response was, and I quote, "No one can pay to be on that page, and there is no affiliate payments made for customers sent from that page. It's free, opinionized, and editorially driven. I do believe it drives millions of dollars a year in business, which is why the potential for things like bribery or conflict is high if it were open to larger groups deciding who is on there." My personal take on that I understand the issue around conflict if you've got multiple individuals. I'm not so sure I quite understand the issue of bribery if you've got more individuals on a board like that, because I take it if you've got multiple people, surely that reduces the potential because you've got multiple people making that ultimate decision.
Personally, I always think that these things are, kind of best, I would prefer to see these things decided by the community and transparently in the same way that most things are done in the WordPress community. I'm a big believer in bottom-up organization. And I believe that, if you have the community deciding things and it's done transparently in the way that we're always encouraged to work, then there's less chance of, kind of this kind of cronyism that might be suspected.
I think it's interesting that the companies that do appear on that page have been there for some considerable time and no other people have been added. And I do believe from what I'd read that Matt has the sole discretion as to who appears on that page and who doesn't. And at one point, although it doesn't now, I think going back a number of years ago, they were affiliate links on those pages. And I do believe that people were paying to be there, although they don't now. And that did stop some years ago.
Yeah, I believe this page was last edited in 2018, which I think was about the last time we had this.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? And of course, there's no simple answer. I think in response to this, but certainly, I think a greater level of transparency would support a better.
But you would have thought that the company concerned would know better, being that they have been on that page some considerable time. It's not as though they were new to the page itself, so we didn't realise. So anyway. Yep,
you've got to wonder if there is some agreement in place that enables certain companies to gain access. But I do believe actually Robert did share a link earlier on in the chat. Maybe there was a little more clarification around specifically that page, because I know Josepha has also jumped into this conversation, and so I appreciate it is obviously on the radar of the people making the decisions around it.
Yeah,
Robert said that Matt is the sole arbiter of who is on that page. He's using words that he knows I can't pronounce.
Excellent. Okay, and sorry, I'm going to rapidly have to fire through some of these because we've got a number of things to cover off. I wanted to mention Michelle Frechette. She has been incredibly generous into Big Orange Heart. She's given an incredible amount of time on various different projects that we've been delivering within Big Orange Heart, and she's really stepped it up another level. She's currently running a campaign to raise $1,000 for Big Orange Heart, and if she hits that target, she has chosen to have the Big Orange Heart tattooed on her wrist. So she currently has the Give WP logo on her wrist, the company that she currently works for and has a deep passion for, and she's offered to have the heart tattooed around the Give WP logo. So I just needed to highlight this. If you can give, then we would really appreciate big.ht/tattoo to specifically support that campaign. I think she's only about $150 last time I looked off of that target of $1,000.
So it could be the next event will be showcasing the tattoo.
And Michelle's session that she did at the conference was one of the highlights. It was just absolutely awesome.
Yeah,
it was just brilliant, just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yep. Michelle has given incredibly into Big Orange Heart, and really, she really does have a big orange heart herself. So, Michelle, thank you so much for all you're doing. Okay, WordPress 5.7 is just around the corner, due for general release on the 9th of March. So we're rapidly heading into the delivery of that. RC1 was delivered 2 days ago. Lots of stuff I wanted to dive into, but unfortunately we've already overrun. So just wanted to I think just to give a quick mention to the lazy loading of iframes, going to be default in 5.7. A number of other things, including a single click HTTP to HTTPS, a simplified default color palette for the admin. And I was just, again, wanted to just read this because I think this is important. This new streamlined color palette collapses all the colors that are used the WordPress source code down to 7 core colors and range in 56 shades that meet the WCAG 2.0 AA recommended color contrast against white and black, which I think was certainly worth a mention. We're looking at accessibility within core and within the admin side of WordPress. So big hats off to those that are taking on this project. Also, another feature that is sitting in 5.7, it's one of those features that I find myself thinking, why have we not had this for years? And it turns out that the track ticket that was opened up,
isn't it about 5 years old, that ticket?
Is now 5 years old.
Yeah.
So 5.7 will bring this feature that will enable you to reset a user's password directly from the admin, rather than asking the user, can you go to this login link and then hit the reset password button, drop in your email address, etc., etc. The only thing I would mention on this is that it's another hover state within the WordPress admin. And I do question those. If you're a keyboard user, if you're unable to use a mouse to gain access to these things, the keystrokes it takes to get to that setting, especially if your user is quite a way down the list. Obviously, you can search for your user, but it just adds so many extra additional steps to get to that setting because it's a hover state. I think we need to see these sorts of things in the profile, in the user's profile, to give individuals that aren't using a mouse, that are using keyboards to access the admin panels, easier access to these sorts of settings. But certainly,
it's always actually been a bugbear for me for a number of years, and maybe it's just my own inefficiency at mouse manipulation, that hover states on menus in lots of sites, you just keep missing off the menu and then you're having to go back and everything. And it just, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Is it me?
No.
Or I just find some menus, it's like, oh, I've just missed it again. I'll slow down and that's it. That's it. There you go.
Yep. Absolutely. I'm right there with you, Leo. Constantly. Okay. Yeah, it's so easy to miss them, but obviously, if you're unable to use a mouse, then obviously these sort of things become even more difficult. Okay, I'm just really quickly wanted to mention, we're continually monitoring the situation in relation to in-person events. Obviously we touched on it quite a bit already, but whilst we remain virtual, we're also hosting, Big Orange Heart are hosting a number of other events within the space. I just wanted to quickly mention them. PHP London, DPIP, Leeds PHP, these are all events that are hosted on this platform. So if you're in live.bigorangeheart.org right now, those events are also delivered through the platform, and we are offering the platform free of charge to the community to, provided your meetup meets the ethos of Big Orange Heart. We're focused on wellbeing and mental health within the remote working communities. If you are a meetup organizer and are looking for a venue and are looking for a home for your meetup at this time, then please do contact us, bigorangeheart.org/contact. Let us know a bit about your meetup, what you're looking to achieve, what your, a bit of background about what your meetup does and who you're trying to serve. We can actually deliver this platform free of charge to you, along with a lot of support behind the scenes to actually enable you to run your event in the style that you are attending this event right now. Okay, sorry, that was a lot of me talking. For that, I'm now going to stop talking, and we're now going to hand over to our first speaker of the evening, Tom Greenwood. Tom, if you are there, would you mind just turning your... Excellent, Tom. I'm just going to invite you up on screen. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, how you doing?
Good to see you. So, Tom, you're going to be giving your talk this evening, Making WordPress Sustainable, which is obviously such an incredibly important topic. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing your knowledge and your expertise in this subject matter.
That's all right. No problem.
So, Tom, you are the co-founder of London agency, Wholegrain Digital. So, a certified B Corp and a specialist in web performance and sustainability.
We are
And
indeed, yeah.
I've got to say, fantastic sites that have been coming out of your agency. They're always a pleasure to admire.
Well, that's nice. That's really nice to hear. And I think we've been very lucky with some good briefs recently, and a good team as well.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, Tom, we're not going to take up any more of your time. We're going to hand the stage over to you. So I'm just going to bring your slides up on screen. Whilst we all disappear off, Tom is going to be running a live Q&A at the end of his session this evening. So if you do have any questions for Tom, then please do drop them in the chat if you're in live.bigorangeheart.org. We will be grabbing those questions and bringing them up on screen for all of us to see. If you are out on the socials, please do drop them in the comments. We will make sure that your questions are presented to Tom at the end of his session. For now, Tom, thank you very much. It's over to you.
Great. Thanks, Dan. So I'm going to be talking about making WordPress sustainable. And I've taken a bit of a risk on this one, and I decided to experiment and remove nearly all of the words from my slides, because I thought slides without loads of words on them are nicer. But now I'm worried that I'm going to forget what I'm supposed to be talking about. So if I lose my way halfway through, then you'll know why. But let's see how we get on. So I'm going to start off by sort of quickly talking through like how I got here and why I'm even talking about this topic. So when I was at university, I studied product design, and my first graduate jobs were in product design in the days when product design meant designing real things that were made in factories and came in boxes, and before they were digital. And I was really passionate about sustainability at the same time, and so I wrote my thesis at university on sustainable product design and sort of researched tools and techniques of how we could design products to make them compatible with a sustainable economy. And that led me to sort of one of my first web projects, which was espdesign.org, which launched, I don't know when, I mean, 2001 or something, I think the first version, something like that. And it was basically like all of this stuff that I'd researched, pulling it together and putting it on the web so that people could find it in one place. And that was really exciting and led me on to get my first graduate jobs, trying to do like put all of this into practice, do sustainable product design in the real world. And I had a couple of interesting projects, but ultimately I ended up sort of feeling a bit like this and feeling a bit disillusioned that, you know, there is potential to do some good stuff in sustainable product design, and perhaps I gave up too easily. But it felt like I despite my best efforts, I was sort of designing landfill and wasn't particularly inspired. But there was this exciting thing called digital that promised to be the panacea, with solve all the world's environmental problems. You could make products and services that had real value in the world, lit up people's days, and didn't have an environmental impact. They weren't made in factories, they didn't come in boxes, they weren't shipped across the world, and they didn't end up in landfill at the end of their lives. And I thought, well, this sounds great. So I thought, what I want to do is move my sort of design into the digital world. And this was sort of back in the mid 2000s. And see whether this is really going to work, and it seemed exciting at the time, and that sort of led me on the journey that I've been on over the last more than a decade, really, and really to why I set up Wholegrain Digital with my wife Vanita in the first place. So we set up Wholegrain with the idea of like being a sustainable agency, working with positive clients, helping to make a positive difference in the world, and kind of sleeping tight at night knowing that we had no environmental impact. And it wasn't until 9 years later in 2016 when we actually started asking the question, well, is it true that digital products don't have any environmental impact? Or is this just a sort of a blind assumption that we've made? And we were going through the process of certifying as a B Corp, as Dan mentioned, and in the B Corp assessment, we had to sort of, talk about our products and services and how we work out their impact. And basically, if you make digital products and services, then you just skip this section. It doesn't really apply to you. And it sort of made us think, well, this seems a bit strange. Maybe it should apply to us. Maybe we should dig into it and do some research. And in doing that research, what we found out was that the internet does indeed have a very significant carbon footprint. The internet as a whole, if you take the whole system, which is the biggest machine that humans have ever created, consumes a lot of electricity. And that electricity is coming from power stations. Some of them have very low emissions or renewable sources, but a lot of it is fossil fuel powered. And so when you add that all up, the emissions are roughly equivalent to Germany, which is sort of about the 7th most polluting country in the world, and perhaps more shockingly, roughly equivalent to global aviation, which is something that I think a lot of us think about climate change, and you sort of immediately think about airplanes and flying being bad for the environment. And while that's true, what we don't think about is the fact that the internet, if you actually look at it behind the scenes, it has pretty much equivalent emissions. And since the pandemic, the digital technology has almost certainly overtaken aviation, as our demand for data has increased and demand for flying has reduced. And this electricity is used in a number of places, but you can kind of simplify it down to these 3 areas. So there's data centers, sort of the huge warehouses full of computers that are processing all of our services day in, day out. Then you've got the transmission networks, which send all of the information around the world, which also run on electricity. And then all of the end user devices, including the networking gear within homes and offices and so on, that actually delivers that information to us in our hands. So once we realized this, we thought, well, we need to take this seriously as an agency. If our mission as a company is to be a sustainable business and to use digital for good, then we need to take digital sustainability seriously and kind of put it at the heart of what we do as a company, and try to figure out how we can apply that. And this sort of led us down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So over the last few years, since sort of last 5 years, I guess, we've worked on a number of projects just internally, separate from our client projects, to try and deepen our own knowledge and help raise awareness of digital sustainability and what we can do within the sort of web design community. So we launched a website carbon calculator at websitecarbon.com, and I'm hoping we're going to launch version 3 of this year. We were going to do it last year, and certain things distracted us, but hopefully this year we'll launch a new version of it. But it's really just a way of getting people thinking and getting a sense of how this big impact of like the internet as a whole starts to boils down to individual web projects. And I think that's been a really powerful tool. We've run well over 2 million tests now, which is really exciting to see that people are engaged with it. We co-wrote the Sustainable Web Manifesto a couple of years back with a bunch of other people in the industry, really as a way of trying to sort of get people thinking about some key concepts of sustainability that could be applied in projects. And you can go to sustainablewebmanifesto.com and you can read that. And if you believe in the principles, you can sign the pledge and put your name on there. We also launched, sorry, these are blurry. We also launched a newsletter, Curiously Green, about 1.5 years ago. And this has been really good as a way of actually getting to meet a lot of people who are interested in this topic and share, bring everything together that like other people are doing and put it together in one place every month and help to sort of raise awareness. And you can sign up for that if you go to the bottom of the Whole Grain Digital website. And it keeps going. So we recently launched sustainablewebdesign.org. We did this in collaboration with Mighty Bytes, which is a B Corp agency, WordPress agency over in Chicago. Definitely go and look at the work that they're doing in pioneering like kind of ethical, social and environmental web design. And we worked on this together as a resource for strategies you can apply in web design projects to sort of focus on sustainability and tie in like social and environmental goals together. And then recently, we launched this digital declutter toolkit with Business Declares, which is a sort of starter guide for businesses looking at how can they think about digital carbon footprints. So we've been doing all these little kind of side projects, squeezing them in between the other stuff that we're doing. And then recently, I wrote a book to try and bring all of this together, all of the things that we've been learning, both within our team at Wholegrain and also from loads of other people in the web design community, and really trying to get this topic on the map within the web design community. It's like sustainability is something that we need to be talking about. We're in the decisive decade of action on climate change, and the digital industry is in this sort of weird sort of pivotal place where on the one hand it can be such a powerful driver of positive change both socially and environmentally, but at the same time it has such a staggering environmental impact of its own, and there's been so little discussion of it within the industry until very recently. And I really wanted to sort of help just nudge that conversation along and say, look, if we actually start talking about this and start sharing knowledge and experiences, then actually we can do something about it and make sure that the web genuinely is part of the solution and not part of the problem. So what about WordPress? And can WordPress be sustainable? I've heard people ask me, if you care about sustainability as an agency, then why do you use WordPress? It's a PHP-based CMS. In some ways, it's sort of inherently inefficient. It's got a reputation in some parts of the web community for sort of creating bloated websites that have too many plugins. So is WordPress actually a tool that can be efficient and sustainable? And in my opinion, the short answer to that is yes, it can be. And WordPress is neither inherently efficient or inherently inefficient. The beauty of WordPress is that actually it's an open source tool. You can really tailor it to do what you want it to do, and it can be super efficient. And there's so many great things about WordPress that have nothing to do with sustainability that genuinely mean that it's just a brilliant tool to deliver real value to people, that there's no point throwing all of that goodness away when we can make it efficient, we can make it sustainable, and it's powering 40% of the web. So actually, if we want to make a dent in sort of the carbon footprint of the internet, then WordPress is the perfect place to start. So let's look at a few practical actions that you can take in web projects, in your WordPress projects. So in design, I'll just go through a few things in design just to sort of get you thinking. So one of the things that I would highly recommend thinking about right from the beginning, before you even put anything graphic on a page, is really start thinking about the user journeys and how we can streamline them. Because ultimately, the less time people spend getting lost on websites looking for things, and less pages people have to click through, the less interactions they have to go through to actually achieve what they want to achieve, the less energy is going to be used, but also the better the user experience. It's a win-win for everybody. It's just really good user experience. And this is a nice example here on the Finisterre website, where you don't have to go to a separate shopping cart page. It's just always there, and you can see in your shopping cart what you've got in your shopping cart. So you don't get this sort of awkward yo-yo user journey where you want to maybe buy several things from the same store, and you keep going to your shopping cart and browsing it and then coming back and forgetting where you were and then having to go through the menu to get to the right place again. You just have one seamless user journey, and it just gathers your basket along the way. So streamlining user journeys, I think, is really a great starting point. That said, once you do get into the sort of the more detailed design, then one of the single most valuable things you can do in the design process is really think about images efficiently. And images in terms of page weight and the actual amount of data transferred every time somebody visits a web page. The images are the single biggest thing on most pages. Assuming you don't have any video, then images are probably going to be the biggest factor. And there's often a kind of an assumption that a web page has to have a full screen hero image that fills your field of view as soon as you land on a website. And there's a time and a place for everything. But actually, starting the design process from the point of view of actually we're not going to have any images by default, but we'll add images in places where they add real value to the user and we can justify their existence. Means that you can actually streamline a website by design rather than just designing it without thinking and then trying to optimize it later. The Oxfam Policy and Practice website here is an example of where, you know, the main part of the website actually is just typography and space and color and shape, and doesn't have any big images at all. There are, lower down the same page, there are some very small thumbnails that illustrate certain key things, but images are really kept to a minimum, and yet actually it enhances the user experience rather than takes away from it. That said, we do like images. We all like images. They help us kind of build an emotional connection with what is otherwise just a plastic screen covered in tiny pixels. And there's lots of things we can do to optimize the images in the design process, not just in the kind of technical development process. So just to sort of illustrate this point, thinking about the size of the images and the type of the images and the styling of the images can have a really big impact. So this is just a photograph of a horse that lives near me. And this image, 1.2 megabytes, if it's set to fill my screen at 1280 by 800 as a JPEG. But if I halve the dimensions, it's actually 70% smaller. It's not 50% smaller, it's 70% smaller, because there's a sort of square law going on. So it's come from 1.2 megabytes down to 360 kilobytes. But then if you look at the image on the right-hand side of the screen, I've slightly badly, I'm sure graphic designers will cringe, but I've blurred the edges of the photograph to remove the detail and give a sort of an illusion of a shallower depth of field. And this is basically halved the size of the image again. It's the same actual pixel dimensions, 640 by 400, but the actual file size is half the size. So this is something really worth bearing in mind, that image file sizes are related to the physical size in pixel dimensions, but also the amount of detail in the image. So if you have like a plain background, or you take photographs with a shallow depth of field, that actually helps reduce the file sizes. And it can, you know, potentially, if you use it carefully, can look really beautiful. Then we can also think about the other element of detail is color. So if we strip the color out of this image, it's still the same size, but now we've got it down to 129 kilobytes as a JPEG. So it's now 10% of the size of the original image. Now, and I know that black and white doesn't necessarily work for all cases, but it's worth keeping in mind that a monochrome image can be a smaller file size, and it doesn't have to be black and white. You know, monochrome could be blue and white, it could be red and white. There's lots of sort of creative things that you can do with an image that reduce the amount of detail, but could also create a really interesting visual effect and keep the file sizes small. And we've just been talking about JPEGs. So, I mean, when you do get into actually implementing it, looking at like the new image formats is definitely a key thing to look at. So WebP images, the same image on the left, 85 kilobytes, the black and white one, 67 kilobytes as a WebP. So really, really small images. But actually, it's not that tiny. It's not a thumbnail. It's 640 by 400 pixels. So it's sort of quite a decent sized image. And it just shows how, if you go through these steps, you can actually really whittle it down by design rather than just optimizing it later. And I've also mentioned just at the top of here, look for AVIF. So AVIF image format, it's not supported by all browsers yet, but it seems to be getting adopted faster than any image format that I'm aware of in the past. So I reckon fairly soon that will get adopted by most major browsers. And the image file sizes of AVIF are about, I think they're about 30 to 50% smaller than WebP. So that'll be a great thing, that we can have really nice images with really small files. So I said that images are the big factor if you're not using videos. But video, like, it consumes huge amounts of data to stream a video. So if you are going to use video, then this is the key thing to look at. Firstly, question, like, is a video the right format for your information? And that's not just a question of like, should we have a video or should we not have a video? Think about whether actually there's better ways of presenting that information. So for example here, I haven't got a GIF. I should have had a GIF to show you this, but or a video even. But basically, this is a demonstration of how to use a heat pump, and they were going to have a video, and they decided instead that we'll have a scroll animation. And the animation is nice because it means that the user can control the timeline. They basically can skip through the steps to understand how a heat pump works in a way that you can't do with a video. A video is kind of really awkward to figure out where to go, whereas an animation, you can actually have defined steps that you can skip through really easily. It's good for accessibility because you can have real text next to the animation, explaining each step so that people can actually read it, search engines can read it, and also it can save people time, because a video, you kind of have to watch the whole thing before you know whether it's useful or not. Whereas an animation where you can control the actual timeline of it, you can skip through quite quickly and say, okay, I learned what I wanted to learn, or actually that's not useful to me, I'm going to move on. Whereas a video, you might sit there for 2 minutes and then realize, oh, I've just wasted 2 minutes and streamed a load of data. So think carefully about videos, whether you really need them, whether there are alternatives, and if you are going to use videos, just keep them as short as possible and optimize them and compress them as much as you can. So fonts, I'm going to talk quickly about fonts. Font files can add up to a lot of in terms of file size, and the most efficient fonts are system fonts. So Arial, Times New Roman, Roboto on Android, all the fonts that are installed on your machine. And I know they're not beautiful, but they're worth thinking about. Hotels.com is a successful business and they only use system fonts. And I know that there's lots of people probably thinking, yeah, but Hotels.com is not exactly a design masterpiece. But it is a good example of how you don't always have to use a custom font. That said, custom fonts are fantastic. They can really kind of add a lot of beauty and an emotional connection and brand engagement. But they can add a lot of weight. So, for example, Into UI, really nice open source font. It's got 9 weights, and each weight is a 300 kilobyte file. So just the fonts alone, if you added all 9 weights to your website, you're going to have a pretty heavy website before you've even added anything else. But there's a lot you can do to actually solve this problem. You can subset a font, strip it down to only the characters that are used. You can convert TTF files to WAF2 files. So we actually got Into UI down to 2.3% of its original size just by doing that, just selecting the characters for English, converting to WAF2, and that's for 1 weight, but we only need 1 weight, or maybe you need 2 weights. But you can see how you can get this down really small. 7 kilobytes is pretty good. And low energy colors are something to think about. OLED screens are increasingly popular, and basically they're little tiny light bulbs. So white means all the light bulbs are switched on, black means they're all switched off, and everything in between is somewhere in between. So darker colors increasingly will actually reduce energy consumption on end user devices and are worth thinking about in the design process. So I'm going to skip forwards onto, because I know that we're short of time, I'm going to skip forwards onto some sort of more technical things you can do. One is if you're developing, whatever you're developing, whether it's a theme or a plugin, think about the code that's actually being loaded on the front end, because every single visitor to a website has to load that up. Danny Van Kooten, who produced the MailChimp for WordPress plugin, wrote about how he had removed 20 kilobytes of JavaScript from being delivered on the front end of sites that use this plugin. And it's installed on over 2 million websites. So the 20 kilobytes of JavaScript on its own is kind of trivial. But when it's scaled over 2 million websites, he estimated that they were going to save 700 tons of CO2 emissions per year just from that one action. So it just shows how little details at scale can have a really, really big impact, both positive and negative. Granola is a framework for WordPress. It's a development framework for building WordPress themes that we use at Wholegrain. It's open source, so you can check that out at the link on the slide, and we'll share the slides later. But if you're a developer looking to build custom themes, then it's definitely worth looking at. It's really built for high levels of efficiency. That's its main thing. If you're looking for more off-the-shelf themes, then I highly recommend looking at GeneratePress. GeneratePress is sort of its mantra is it's the lightweight theme that's got a high level of flexibility built in, but really, really small file sizes. And then Softy WP, somebody may have heard of, is it's kind of the I don't know what you call it, but it's just the sort of the ultimate lean WordPress theme. It doesn't do very much, but it does it in 6 kilobytes, which is super impressive. So check that out if you want like a super streamlined blog theme. Image optimization. I talked about images. I'm a big fan of Short Pixel's WordPress plugin. Short Pixel does an amazing job of like optimizing images, converting them to the appropriate file formats. So for example, like automatically converting images to WebP format within WordPress so that you don't have to manually optimize every image. It just does a great job at handling it all for you. There are other services that do this, but we've tested a bunch of them and we found that Short Pixel seemed to be the most reliable and give us the best results in terms of small file sizes and retaining like high image quality. But WebP Express is a good option as well. It's a free WordPress plugin. Short Pixel is a paid service. It does have a free allowance, but it's essentially paid service. WebP Express is a really good option that does a similar thing of converting your images to WebP format on the fly inside, well, not on the fly, but inside your WordPress installation. One little thing, I'm very sorry about these blurred images. This is a screenshot of the Malcare website, which you probably can't tell because it's so blurred. But one of the interesting things is that Akshat, the founder of BlogVault and Malcare, pointed out that 50% of traffic to most websites is bots. And actually, just having a system in place, whatever that system is, but Malcare is a good example, a system that shields you from those bots and keeps them from hitting your WordPress installation is actually not just good for security, but it's also a good way of reducing energy consumption. And tracking, I'm just going to say, like, have a mindful approach to tracking. Tracking has its place, but I think it's like there's too much of the attitude of like data is good, we must collect as much data as possible. And tracking's got a double impact environmentally, where you're not only shipping like big files into people's browsers with tracking scripts, but you're then using those scripts to then harvest data and send it back and store it. Let alone like the privacy implications of it and the ghastly user experience of like horrible cookie banners and so on. So just think really mindfully about tracking. Look at some minimal options like minimal Google Analytics, Fathom, Cabin, Plausible, some really nice lightweight privacy focused options to consider. And in the front end, when you're sort of building a site, Safari developer tools inside the Safari browser has an energy impact metric, which you can see in the middle on this dial. And you can basically load a page and it will give you the CPU usage so that you can test different like animation effects, interaction effects and things, and see how they impact CPU energy, which is really cool. So I'm nearly at the end. Hosting. This slide, I was the sole arbiter of this slide, and I thought that I should be the only person that decides what goes on this slide in order to avoid bribery. But these are some companies that basically have a commitment to using green energy in their data centers and who offer specific WordPress hosting. So on the left-hand side of the slide, we've got basically the companies that don't actually have, as far as I can tell, don't actually have an environmental policy, but they use Google Cloud Platform, and Google Cloud Platform has a commitment to using renewable energy, and Google's obviously really driving the field in terms of energy efficiency of data centers. So they're kind of piggybacking off some of the good stuff that Google's doing. And then on the right-hand side, we've got companies that offer WordPress hosting who do have an actual environmental policy, and they talk about it and they care about it. Raidboxes, Timpani, Qualo, Crystal, Green Geeks. I'm not personally actually recommending any specific hosts here, and I haven't used all of them, but these are ones that people have suggested to me and who we've had information from and seen that they've been showing some real commitment. So definitely move to a green host is probably the easiest thing you can do, and doesn't mean you don't have to change your website at all to achieve this one. You just migrate to another host. So definitely worth thinking about. But also you can use like static hosting that converts your WordPress into a static site. That's a pretty cool, interesting idea to minimize energy consumption. Static's a good example of that, and this is quite a new field that I think we'll see more of. And finally, this one I really love, automatic platform optimization for WordPress. It was launched not that long ago, a few months back. And I think it's sort of one of the best kept secrets in the WordPress world at the moment, where basically Cloudflare's built an integration that, to a greater or lesser extent, kind of does the job of converting your WordPress site into a static site. And it serves not just the actual like CSS files, but all of the HTML from the CDN, so that your WordPress installation sort of hardly ever gets hit by your traffic, and it makes your websites way faster as well. So check out automatic platform optimization for WordPress. It's $5 a month as an add-on to their free plan, so it's really cheap. And finally, I'd say just talk about sustainability in the WordPress community. That's what we really need to do. We need to start the conversation. And on that note, I think we're going to go to Q&A.
Tom, thank you so much for giving that and sharing that information with us. It's such an incredible topic and an important topic that we need to be talking about right now. Sorry, Leo, we're both hitting buttons at the same time there. There's a number of questions that have come in, and we'll jump into those. But just something I'm going to just hog this just for a moment. I really want to just touch on is this idea of headless WordPress, and the concept around being more sustainable. And is it, have we still got a server running to run WordPress? And I think there's probably, I don't know if there's a bit of a misconception in relation to headless because of the fact that you do still obviously have this WordPress server running there. I don't know what you be interested in your thoughts on the concept of headless in relation to being more sustainable.
Yeah, I think there's sort of three things that are related and sort of overlap, but are not the same thing. So you've got serverless, you've got static, and you've got headless. And I think from an environmental point of view, static is really, really good. You've just got the files on a CDN and they get served. And whether you're using, like, whatever the technical stack behind that is to make that happen. I think on the kind of, in terms of when somebody requests the website, that's the most efficient way of delivering. It's just static files from a CDN straight to the user. Serverless is kind of the next level of that, where it's static, but then they're switching off the server with the WordPress installation on behind the scenes. Like if you're not logged into WordPress just gets shut down and doesn't exist. So you're saving even more energy there. And then headless is this kind of weird in between one, where headless can be a means to achieve those things, but at the same time, it's not inherently delivering any extra efficiency. Like you could have a headless site with WordPress running behind the scenes, and the headless site itself could be super inefficient and making loads of like unnecessary queries and so on. So I think headless is like a tool that can be really powerful, but doesn't inherently make things more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. I think what I really love, particularly about these conversations, we're having a lot of these conversations at the moment. It feels like with the events that we're doing around both sustainability and accessibility. And I think the real key point that we keep coming back to across both of those really important topics is ultimately everything that you do that creates a more sustainable and more accessible website ends up creating a better user experience for the end user.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. There's really no downsides to most of this stuff. Yes, sometimes you have to spend a little bit of extra time in terms of attention to detail. But a lot of that is a learning curve that you go through when you first start looking into something new. And over time, it kind of becomes standard. And actually what you end up doing, exactly as you said, Dan, is you just end up making better user experiences for everybody. And that surely can only be a good thing.
Tom, do you think we'll get to the point, as we have done with accessibility, that people will actually demand, or that there'll be governmental, hopefully not, but some sort of organization that says that websites that are inefficient basically get blacklisted in what they do? Or do you think it will be something that will come about by just the rule of the jungle, that the faster websites will be the more efficient ones?
I think it's probably more likely to be just the rule of the jungle. Partly because, as you said, like if you pursue efficiency, you're essentially pursuing performance as well. They're not literally the same thing, but they're very closely linked. And performance is a big factor in the success of any website. But then I also think that it's very hard to draw up. I've spoken to loads of people about this. It's very hard to draw up, like, what would the regulation be that a government could put in place to kind of like put like an energy rating on a website? Would that, is it an A or a D? Like,
knowing our government, it'll be, does it work in Internet Explorer 8 or something like that? How it performs in that environment. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, Leo, that you said about accessibility, because kind of I don't know if people kind of assume now that websites are accessible, but because that it's pretty wild around accessibility as well. That kind of, I think it's the sort of thing that everyone knows they should be doing, but oh it's hard, or we don't have the or we'll do that next time, and I think accessibility and web sustainability is kind of still seen by some people as a nice to have, and that is that's a kind of the difficult thing. I know that Mick spends a lot of time saying there's a legal requirement to make sites accessible, but that doesn't actually make people make their sites accessible. So
no, it's another rule that it's a rule that's there that nobody's ever enforced. And
I think that I would like to think that that both these things, sustainability and accessibility, will just become part of the developer's way of working, in the same way that when responsive websites came in, I remember having a bizarre conversation with a client, and I was going, well, I'm going to give you this for free because you need this. And they were going, we don't want it. We don't like it. And I was going, but I'm doing the extra work, and it won't cost you any extra because you really need to have this. And they were like, no. But now nobody would build a site now that wasn't responsive. And I think that that's the best way. I think that's the only way to get accessibility and sustainability, is to have developers just building it that way. And that's how they work.
So another way on the sustainability, Tom, is that what I would suspect is the people who are ending up having to pay are the big hosting companies, and if they can reduce your image sizes on transport out, then their bills go down as well as yours. So how many of them will be doing, so an example would be for somebody like WP Engine, who host millions and millions of sites. Will they be going, do you know what, by just taking 10% off the image sizes of every single site, we've saved ourselves, enough to pay for the bubbly at the shareholders meeting next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see, they're already, their commitment to performance is obviously partly because they know that people want fast websites, but it's also part of their business model in the sense that they're kind of fairly aggressive caching layers and so on help take load off the servers, which saves them money as well. So it's a win-win for everybody when they do that.
Have you?
We did have a question coming from Elliot. He did actually ask another question in relation to WebP, but he answered it almost exactly as he asked the question earlier. But, Elliot, he's asked, is static headless still as difficult as it used to be in regards to e-commerce sites?
Oh, I'm not the best person to answer that.
I'll answer it, yes. Next. Elliot's other question was much better. So, but it's already been answered.
Absolutely. And just a couple of comments. Robert said the blurred edge trick, brilliant. Thanks for the tip. It was that idea of manipulating the images and editing the images before they even hit the servers.
Yeah. I mean, just edit them a bit better than I did. I don't want to see the internet covered in like badly blurred photos.
with a strap line that says Tom said do this.
Yeah.
We had Hannah Smith come and talk on Leeds PHP recently, this week actually, last week, and it's shared some really scary numbers in terms of the impact from the internet on the environment. And one number that really struck me as you saw was 43 gigatons of CO2 being produced by the internet. I mean, they are staggering numbers when you start to really dive into this, aren't they?
Yeah, it really is, and I think it's one of those weird things where it's hard to relate to because it's invisible, and each individual thing that we're doing is kind of trivial and insignificant in its own right. But it's the fact that there's trillions of those insignificant things happening around the world every day that adds up to such a huge impact.
Absolutely, and Andy actually pointed out something that I personally hadn't really given much thought to in relation to Zoom calls. Turning video off during Zoom calls found to lower emissions by 96%, according to a recent IET article. And of course, we're all sitting on here, delivering content and having video running that whole time. Of course, that absolutely makes sense.
But we're not flying anywhere. So.
Yeah, it is.
Exactly.
It is down to the technology and how you use it. So, watching TV on satellite is actually, in a way, now the satellites are out there, is more efficient than something like Netflix, because Netflix is sending the individual packages to every single person. But you don't have Sky and Chill really, so that doesn't work.
Tom, really just want to say a huge thank you for giving your time this evening. I really appreciate having you here, and I love the fact that your talk also linked into Tim's upcoming talk about sustainability and moving into security. Obviously touching on the fact that there is a connection between the two. So thank you very much. A nice seamless connection into the next one.
Very good. Very
Wonderful.
Good.
So Tom,
you.
we're gonna say goodbye to you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Tom.
And we are now going to invite Tim to come and join us. So where are we? Oh, Tom, still there? There we go. Tim, welcome.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Good evening.
Tim. Evening.
Tom has completely ruined the start of my talk. Seamlessly introduced security from sustainability.
That's right. It's all right. Look,
Brilliant.
Tim, I have a sofa behind me which I will go and hide behind if it's one of your talks. Because normally, yes.
Fine. This is a
It's
safe
fine.
talk. It's all nice.
This is a safe talk. We don't have to tell everybody to take the
This-
children
this
out of the
is-
room
this
this
is-
time.
This is the cuddly talk, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah, it's got cats in it and everything.
It has got cats in it. So nothing to fear. A nice kitten. What could be scary about that?
Exactly.
I've actually literally got on my notes about Tim sitting right at the bottom, and he scares people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should have some sort of pre-warning come up, shouldn't we? Really?
But no, we have got cats, and this is going to be a nice. I'm really excited. We're getting more into the technical side of it. You're looking at WP-CLI and the command line and some of the tools that we can use to help.
Yes, I mean, anybody can follow along. It's not going. I'm using WP-CLI mainly to simplify showing stuff on the screen rather than spending half the day going, how does FTP work again? So we can just move it along quite quickly. But everything I'm going to show you could do without WP-CLI.
Excellent. Well, Tim, I'm going to bring your slides up, and we are now going to hand the stage over to you. For those of you that haven't met Tim before, he's delivering his talk this evening. So how do you actually fix a hacked site? Tim is a WordPress security consultant, and he helps organizations become more security conscious. And as I say, he does scare people a little bit on some of his talks. So, Tim, if you do have any questions, if you're out on live.bigorangeheart.org or on social media, drop your questions in the live chat, drop your questions in the comments. We will be running a live Q&A session at the end of Tim's talk. So, Tim, thank you very much. We're going to hand the stage over to you.
Thank you very much. Just let them disappear into the ether. All right. Hello. I should point out that this talk is not scary. I don't know where I get this reputation for scary talks from. I never give a scary talk. I never have slides that say doomed on them or anything like that. And tonight, it's going to be a nice, easy talk because we're talking about how to fix something rather than how things get hacked particularly. But I do want to talk a little bit about how things get hacked, so we've got a basis for where we're starting. So we're going to go to my first hack. Yes. I remember the first time that I had to fix a hacked site. it was a good 10 plus years ago. At the time, I ran a small development agency, and we were making plugins, and we made membership software. This was sort of very early WordPress territory. And we were a proper company, which was unusual at this point. But this meant we thought we had to do support. And one day we got a support inquiry that's basically said, your plugin caused my site to be hacked. And we went, oh, because we didn't know any better. We were, it was Cowboy West at the time. And we were sitting there going, well, okay, let's go and have a look. And we did the thing that you never, ever, ever do. If it's not your site and you don't have a maintenance contract with them, what you don't do is log in and go and try and fix things. Now, that site had basically just a simple takeover. So the homepage had a random screenshot of, it was an inappropriate screenshot, and a bunch of text and a bunch of spammy SEO links. The hackers could have done far, far worse. We cleaned it up for them, which we probably shouldn't have, and we did it wrong, and don't do it the way we did it. But we spent a lot of time trying to work out how did they break in to this site? Was it our plugin? Oops. Was it our plugin? We'll go back to that one. Was it our plugin? No, we didn't think it was. We couldn't find any reason for it. And then we remembered the login details they gave us. It was admin, and it really was admin1234 as the password. And it started to dawn on us that our site and our plugin might not have been the cause, and there might have been other security issues. But since then, I have dealt with hundreds, bordering on thousands of hacked sites. Not all of my own, and certainly not all caused by me, thankfully. Otherwise, you'd be querying why I was here. But I've cleaned up an awful lot of sites, is what I'm trying to say. So my name's Tim Nash. I'm a WordPress security consultant. I used to work for a hosting company. Before that, I ran a development agency specializing in membership software and security systems. And before that, I did stuff with security. So I've been around a long time doing a lot of this sort of stuff. If you want to get hold of me, you can find me on tnash in most places. And my website's timnash.co.uk. So how do sites get hacked? Well, almost certainly, it's nearly always you. It's your fault. You don't. You grand internet people. You don't keep your sites up to date, and it's as simple as that. The vast majority of sites don't get hacked because they're not kept up to date, and a drive-by attacker just picks up and hacks them. It's very, very rare that a site is deliberately targeted for a hack. It's nearly all automated, and it's nearly always your fault for not keeping your site up to date, which sounds very blunt. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and sometimes you can just forget, and this is the consequences. So we can stop sites being hacked by keeping things up to date, but let's say the worst has happened. We're going to take the scenario, we're an agency or we have clients, and they're not all on our amazing maintenance contracts. So they maintain their own sites, but we have an unreasonable high level of admin access for this non-maintaining level. And we're going to go in and we're going to fix their sites for them. So fixing a hacked site, it's really simple. I'm going to tell you it, and then you can ask me some questions. First off, you don't panic. B, grab your towel, make a cup of tea, don't panic, and all we do is restore your backup. Cool. Right, that's me done. My name's Tim Nash. Yeah, that's obviously not going to be my answer. You should always take backups. Please. You should always take backups. However, using them for a hacked site restore is not always the answer. In fact, it's very rarely the answer. And when you start to think about it, you might realize why. Because on the one hand, you're there going, my site is currently in a state where it's doing stuff and things are happening. You know, I'm sending out thousands upon thousands of spam. A Bitcoin miner is running on it. I can't log in. this didn't happen yesterday. Okay, this didn't happen yesterday. That's fine. I'll just restore yesterday's backup. But A, you don't actually know it wasn't happening yesterday. And B, you've assumed only one hack. When you come to a site that has been compromised, you have to assume there are multiple vulnerabilities in the site, that someone has deliberately put in multiple backdoors, and you need to know when they initially managed to gain entrance. Otherwise, if you restore the site today, you can go, phew, I've restored it. 20 minutes later, what? Why is the site hacked again? And it can be as little as a few seconds later. I've watched, and I won't lie and say I wasn't smirking at the time, which is bad because I shouldn't have been, but the person had insisted that they should restore their backup. I explained that this was probably not the greatest of ideas, but they insisted, and go ahead, and they restored their backup. They were actually hacked again before the backup had been fully restored, because the vulnerability was still there and the automated script was still hitting the endpoint. So it hit the endpoint and just rehacked the site instantly again. So unless we know when we first got hacked, how we got hacked, why we got hacked, we can't really use our backups to restore to a point. There are a few times where we might have to. A good example is ransomware. If we're locked out of our system entirely, we want to use that backup. The other time is where we know very specifically how and when things happened. A good example of this would be when let's say there's a major vulnerability in a well-known WordPress plugin, and it causes an almost instant large amount of attacks hitting sites. And we can identify the payload and go, right, yes, that specific attack definitely was the cause of that payload. We know that this needs to be updated at this time, so we can back it up then. That circumstance is almost never. We can never be 100% sure that we've cleaned everything up anyway. So we need to do a different plan. We need to go forensic. Now, this is what most people who are, if you pay someone to clean your hack site, including a lot of the security plugin people, they'll clean your hack site for you. There's a lot of people who do maintenance and security and hack site cleanup. This is what they'll do. And it's not a bad plan if you don't know anything about the site that you're working with. So they'll go on and they'll install some sort of diffing tool. Now, that diffing tool could be something like, for example, WordFence has an integrity checker, which basically compares the files on WordPress.org with the files on your computer. And it can see if there's any differences. They also can run scripts that can basically detect patterns, very similar way to your antivirus software. They can even run antivirus software on there. And they can match out and look for all the files that they think are dodgy and delete them or replace them back. That is how most companies do it, which is really good. It works 7 out of 10 times. Why this might not work? It assumes several things. One, it assumes that the files are always going to be WordPress files, or that they're going to match the heuristics that they have on file. Now, for some companies, they have a massive database to work with. So they can get a pretty high probability that they've seen the various malware. And most malware, most hacks on WordPress sites are not unique. The same code is used to hack other sites, and the same code to create backdoors is on other sites. So there's a reasonably good chance that they've seen it before. But code can change, different vulnerabilities can appear, more backdoors can be placed. And that's the key. More backdoors can be placed. And a single hack can result in lots and lots of backdoors. And not all of them are PHP files that are just sitting there. Hacks can hide in weird and wonderful places, from favicons, crons, lots of things in cron jobs and shells and things just waiting to just trigger. So being sure you've got them all out, that's quite a challenge to be absolutely sure. So while it's possible to do this route, again, you have to really know what the system was like before. So if you've got a good system where you already know the state of everything, you know what files were on the system and you know what state the files were in, and you can monitor changes to files or the introduction of new files and new system changes, for example, a cron suddenly randomly getting added, then this is the route you could take. So actually, for a lot of you who might be running in an agency environment where you maintain and manage your systems, if you can get a decent overview, you can go down this route. Now, the reason a lot of third parties will use this route is because it's the least intrusive. They can go in, they can clean out what they can see, and they can go, yep, done. Call us back if there's more problems. Most people, knowing that 9 out of 10, maybe, well, I reckon 7 out of 10 times, they're never going to get called back, so it's fine. But that really persistent one, that annoying one, that hack that just keeps coming back, this process won't work for. And because you don't want to spend any longer than you have to, it makes more sense to go a different route, I think, every time, rather than hoping this works 7 out of 10 times. Let's go for one that we know is going to work 9.5 out of 10 times and do it once, because it's often far better to be down for a little while once than it's going to be down several, 3, 4, 5 times over a period of a month, and you having to deal with that, the fallout from that, not just in terms of, oh my God, we got to fix this, but actually the issues with your customers and people starting to notice that you are hacked. So how are we going to do our approach? Well, step 1, take a snapshot of the site. Now, by a snapshot, I mean a backup, but make sure that that snapshot includes your database and all your files and any auxiliary meta information that you think you might need, and get it down. Now, when you download this onto your computer or to the third-party place, be careful, you're downloading effectively malware. Now, one of two things. A, you're downloading what is effectively malware, a virus, and other miscellaneous gubbins. So don't go clicking and executing things, because, well, bad things will happen. But more importantly, your antivirus software, you run antivirus software, right? Yeah, okay, good. Your antivirus software is going to go, I'm going to quarantine this. Now, if that's in a zip file, depending on the antivirus software, or it will go, okay, I've quarantined that, and delete your zip file, never to be seen again. I say this from experience. Make sure that you open the zip file, that all the files are there, and it actually will let you get to those files, and those files have data. Don't let your antivirus software gobble it up. But yeah, take extra care. You are dealing with stuff that can be designed to be quite malicious. And I've seen systems where they've put shell scripts specifically hoping that they're going to get a system administrator, and particularly weird things like bat files, which are for Windows. And you're there going, but you knew you hacked a Linux system. And then you go, no, you were hoping to hack the responder who comes in and tries to fix this. That's a little bit of cunning that I don't like. Next, we're going to grab a list of active plugins and themes. You can do this in a multitude of ways. I do recommend using WP-CLI, mainly because you're doing less touching of the system. But either way, we could go and work out what plugins and themes we've got activated. If we're doing WP-CLI, we'd just do something like this, which is WP plugin list, status active, field name. Now, you'll see -- skip plugins and skip themes. This is sort of important because this is saying don't try and run any code that sits inside plugins. Don't try and run any code that's inside themes. Just basically run WordPress as if it was just WordPress. Now, you might find that you can't actually run this command. You might find that WordPress has had its files tampered with, and that actually you just get back a bunch of fatal errors, primarily because people who hack sites don't tend to care whether or not if they put nice error output in places and things like that. And they'll also not bother to check whether or not they're actually running on a web server or WP-CLI. So they'll just do things like $_server server name, whatever that sort of things on there, and just crash your WP-CLI. The other thing is to bear in mind is every time you run this command, you are executing some PHP on the server and could be interacting with any hacked code. Please, 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 please do not run this as root. A few years ago, a colleague of mine accidentally ran a single command as root while dealing with a hack site. And what happened after that is that the hacked site had a piece of code on there. That piece of code was a PHP file that, when it executed as root, ran eval and dropped a shell, a little actual shell script. It then added a cron job in the root cron. It then burst open a port and then happily sat there as a separate web server. The site got cleaned up, and then it took about 3 or 4 days before someone realized that the actual whole container had been owned. It took a lot longer to clean that up than it would have done just a WordPress site. So if you're running any of these commands, make sure that you're running them as an unprivileged user, so you can't do any more harm than it's currently already doing when a general visitor comes. Also, at this point, it's worth just splitting out your list. Plugins from WordPress.org. We're going to install those dead easy. Plugins from premium places and any custom plugins we need to just know about, because we're going to have to install those separately. We're also going to want to get your theme. Now, again, this is just get the theme. Also, make sure that you know if it's a child theme, and make sure that you know about the parent. Is the parent a publicly accessible theme? Because again, if we were to reinstall this and the child theme, you can reinstall this, and if the child theme will try and install its parent theme automatically. If either of these are custom, then we want to just take those and just be aware that we don't want to just try and install them. Next, we're going to export the content. Now, at this point, you're going to be thinking, we're going to get the SQL. No. We're going to use WP export. Now, you might not actually be familiar with WP export. You might be thinking, hang on a minute, Tim, you've missed the WP-DB export. Now, WP export is the XML file for the old WordPress export importer. Now, the reason we're doing this is that it takes only a simplified set of the content. It takes the content, some associated user meta, some of the associated post meta, but it leaves the vast majority of the database alone. This is important. So let's have a quick check what we've got. A backup, yes. We have a plugin list, good, good. We have a theme list. We have an XML export. We're ready to go. So what we're going to do next? We're going to delete the site. Yeah, everything. Ooh. We're going to delete the site, delete the SSH and FTP users. We're going to remove the database. We're going to remove any crons. In the perfect world, you'd be in a container and we're just going to destroy the container. That, I realize, not as easy for most people. But we want to destroy absolutely anything we can. We want to leave no trace that this site was ever on that server. If we can, we want to move servers. That would be ideal. But we don't want anything left about this site or anything associated with this site on that server. We want to burn it all. We want to be checking that there is no processes running for those users. We want to make sure that there are no crons, and that's actual real Linux crons, not WordPress pseudocrons. Want to make sure everything is clear, and we're starting with a blank slate. Well, you're all really good at WordPress. I don't need to tell you what we're going to do next, but it's pretty quick. We're going to reinstall WordPress from scratch. That means literally from scratch. We're going to download a fresh copy. Now, this is really important. You have got a shiny backup. It's wonderful. It's a very nice backup. You've checked it's actually going, you could restore this at any point, but you're not going to. You're going to reinstall everything from scratch. So we're going to start with WordPress. So we'll do all the usual things we would to install WordPress. You can install WordPress however you like, but you could just do WP core download, WP core config, WP core install, done. We have a working copy of WordPress. Obviously, that's not our site, but we have a working copy of WordPress. That's a good start. Next, we go grab our plugin list that we just put in. We insert our plugin list in there, and we install all our plugins again. Dun, 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 dun. All our plugins installed. Now, if you've got premium and custom plugins, you're going to have to individually install those. Now, premium ones, you're going to go to the website that you bought the plugin from, and you're going to re-download it. You're not going to rely on any automatic updaters that you had hanging around. You're going to manually reinstall each one as if this was a fresh purchase. Now, if you've just found a plugin on this list that you can't remember the license code for, let's be honest, yeah, that's how it is. You can't remember the license code for, and you feel that all of a sudden you might have forgotten to pay for it, this is the time to go and buy that license or consider a change. Now, when we get to our custom stuff, how good are you? Have a review. Just maybe for each plugin, just quickly glance through it and go, okay, when did we write this? Because I write code, and hand on heart, I write code that is rubbish. The thing is, my code from last week is more rubbish than the code I wrote this week. And my code from 10 years ago, I'm worried people still have that on their sites. And they do. If this is an older client, you might have some custom work that you did, some fudges might have occurred. So you might want to carefully go through those plugins. Either way, we install our plugins and activate. Notice we haven't got anywhere near the WordPress dashboard or the front end. We're just installing stuff and letting it go. Do the same with your theme. Now, chances are you have a custom theme because you are fancy. You didn't get it from WordPress.org repository. It's customized in some way. Something has changed. This is a reasonably bad place. Now, the good news is you might think that most WordPress vulnerabilities would find their way into a theme. After all, themes tend to be written by people who have a lot to do. A theme can be thought of as an incredibly complicated plugin. They're really hard to build this really complicated plugin that does all of the front end, putting code live, and the person who designs it is a designer. So you have to be multi-talented or have a multi-talented team. So on the face of it, this seems like an obvious place where there's probably vulnerabilities. And there probably is. There probably is. But on the whole, WordPress sites get hacked because of known vulnerabilities. And I'm not saying your theme isn't great, but it's unlikely to be known if it's a custom theme. So while your still could be picked up by an automated scanner and the vulnerability could be found just as easily as if it was on a pass, it's less likely to be the cause than a plugin or that is out of date. That said, you should still be looking for your theme exactly the same way you're looking at your custom plugins and going, okay, did I know what the word sanitization and escaping was? Probably not. I might just go and double check my way through my theme. But we can reinstall our theme. If we keep finding that we're getting hacked over and over again, we need to start looking at these places. This is where we're looking, the custom stuff. This process should get us through happily most automated vulnerabilities that will be picked up. So if we're still getting hacked after this, if we're in that 0.5, it's going to be our custom stuff that's causing the problems. Or we have some user management issues, which we'll get onto in a bit. Next is to restore the safe files from WP uploads. Now, I'm not letting any putting commands in here because this will depend very much on your site. You see, we need to install all the images back. Now, if the site is a smallish site, I genuinely suggest going through by hand and checking each file. The problem with this is WordPress generates a lot of junk. If you imagine every theme that you've ever installed has different image sizes, and quite a lot of those, so that every time you uploaded an image, it generated a multitude of different images. Every time you used an image, it regenerated another bunch. It can mean that one single image might actually have 12, 15, or even 20 files in extreme cases. So you could, even on a tiny site that only has like 100 images, you could end up looking at 5,000 images across your folders, which is not good. But if you can, if you've not gone wild, you've got only a small number of images, you could go through by hand. Failing that, you can use antivirus software to actually scan your WP uploads folder. If you're happy on a command line, using something like ClamAV will get, while ClamAV is absolutely rubbish for most things, for actually this, looking at image files and looking specifically to see if an image file is not an image file, but in fact is some other code, it's quite good. It's most of the rules built into there and the heuristics built into it is quite good. So using something like ClamAV to scan those images before you upload them, that's a good idea. But you can start returning your PNGs, your JPEGs, your WebPs, all of those bits and pieces. Once we've got our images restored, we can look at things like our PDFs. Then we can get to our danger zone stuff, like our SVGs that we were like, did I upload that SVG? Or did that just random? SVGs are wonderful things. They can do things like execute JavaScript inside of them. They are quite, they're not a good file format for security. But upload your files back into place, put them back in your WP uploads folder. Once you're happy, under no circumstances, any file you don't recognize, do not put it back. If you see files with .ico files, don't put them back. If you see a PHP file, don't put it back. And if you've got a folder in your WP uploads called cache or logs or anything like that, we don't put it back. We only want to put files that we know came through. And we go one step further. If you have a forward-facing site where their user is allowed to upload files, who is not a trusted member of staff, then I would not be uploading their content back up until I had a better understanding of what was going on. Next, we're going to re-import our post and content. Now, to do that, it's just WP import our content, bring it back in, then skip plugin and skip in. Now, what this will do is this will create all your posts that you had before, including your custom posts. If you custom posts, any user who was associated with a post, i.e. they were the author, it will create them a new user. And once you've created them as a new user, anyone who hasn't had a post won't be created a new user. So if you had to say an admin user and they never actually wrote a post, they'll never reappear. Up until now, we've not got our users back, but we've got our basic users back, and we can leave them at the level that they will be inserted in, which is by default author. And then we can add other users later. And our site's back. Great. Now, some of you might be thinking, not exactly back. You see, just because we've installed the plugins, the theme, the content, and got some users back, that's not the site. The site had options and changes and things like that. Now, we are nearly 90% there. For the vast majority of sites, it's probably quicker at this stage to just manually go in and change the settings back. I'm already hearing the screams of the people who use page builders and things and have their themes that have a theme page that is 20 pages long going, I don't know what all those settings are. I hear you. I feel your pain. You're probably still better off going and doing this manually. But if you don't do this manually, if you choose not to, you could selectively restore some databases. So it's not exactly the same at the moment, but we can make it the same very quickly. It does suck. Manually updating the options properly sucks. And there are ways we can mitigate this. If we're planning in our heads from the start that we know that we're going to have issues and we want to make updates and we want to be in a position where we can destroy and rebuild sites quickly, which is a good goal, regardless of anything else today. It's not get in that mindset. I can destroy my site and rebuild it quickly. if you can get there in your head, then it will make an awful lot of other things easier. It will make testing really easy, as you will be able to create new sites, spin them up much quicker, test against them and destroy them. It means you can test your backups. It will allow you to hand over code and bits to other developers and get things going quickly. So if you can get it into your head that we want to make our sites as easy as possible to rebuild completely from scratch. That means using things like splitting out our options, making sure that we know what each option does. There are a couple of plugins. WP-CFM is one, which basically will take groups out of the options table and store them for you. Using tools like that really does help. But you need to have done that ahead of time. Otherwise, we're stuck with manually updating options, and that sucks. So you are now thinking, Tim, I have that backup, my shiny backup. Should I restore the database? Yay or nay? Yeah, there is a risk. There's always a risk that there's something not nice in there. But if you're running a WooCommerce site or any sort of e-commerce site, we haven't brought back your orders, so you're going to have to bring those tables forward. You can start restoring selectively certain tables. The couple of tables I would advise strongly against restoring are WP options and the 2 user tables. Too many things can be hidden in those tables. And unless you're willing to manually inspect what you're bringing back in and being sure you understand what you're bringing back in, I really would recommend not restoring those tables. Particularly WP users, look really carefully at things like capabilities of users to make sure no one is mysteriously now an admin or has an admin capability. My favorite one was I saw a hack where a single user who was an e-commerce subscriber was given the ability to add new users. That was the only capability they had, additional to their basic capabilities. But that was enough that they could log in and just create a new user called admin. Off they go. Because once you have the capability to create new users, it has no check for whether or not you can create a user of a higher level than you, because there's no real state. Roles are just a collection of capabilities. So how do we make this process easier? I think you'll all agree this is a rubbish process in that we're wiping everything clean and rebuilding, and it feels like it's so much simpler to just grab that backup or even to forensically move through. Sorry, I'm going to have to take another sip. So how can we make this process easier and quicker? And it's planning. Look at your sites today and go, which ones could I restore quickly? Which sites could I use this process on and be back up in 5 minutes? Because I think about 95% of sites should be back up in about 5-10 minutes. I've done through this process and I've seen sites back up in less than 5 minutes. I've gone through to the point of automating this script and having them back up to the 90% stage in less than 2 minutes. From a hack to 2 minutes later, we're at the stage of 90% there. Now that 90% is not 90% time, that's 90% of the work done. So if you get yourselves into that position where you know, hang on, we need to know about what options we've got, what do it's looking at themes and going, if this theme has hundreds of options, is this a good idea? When we've got lots of complicated moving parts, generally that's a place to hide stuff. So on the whole, I'm a huge advocate of simplifying everything anyway. But one of that, by simplifying everything, it means that we can start looking at things like versioning it. Wouldn't it be good if we could actually put into our version control migrations that show what options we put in? If we can actually have everything version control, then we could just restore from our version control. Likewise, keeping your custom plugins separate from your normal site, letting your normal site automatically update and then bringing in just the custom stuff will make life a lot easier. It makes restoring a lot easier. So we can make the process easier, but we can only make the process easier with planning. This route still has drawbacks. It doesn't help with users. If someone's going to set their password to 1234, this will not help. You have to reforce them to create new users and with new passwords and tell them that it's their fault. As a rule, assume everybody's password is compromised. You're creating new users anyway. They just tell them, lie to them. Tell them that they can't use their old passwords. They have to create new ones and hope they believe you. Then it's back into preventative stuff. Making sure you have two-factor authentication, make sure everything's up to date, all that jazz. And the final thing is to know, do I have to tell anybody? Here in the UK, we do have to tell people. If there's been any sort of data breach, then you need to notify the ICO. You might need to bring the police in certain scenarios. You need to tell your customers. How you handle that, how you do that is a whole other talk, but be aware that you need to know this sort of stuff. From your perspective as an agency dealing with your clients, they are going to panic. Being hacked has been described by some people as on par with your house being burgled. Now, I feel truly sorry for the person who's had their house burgled and then they looked and their site was hacked and they had to make that judgment call of which one was harder on them. But it's a really emotional roller coaster. And when a website owner sees their site hacked, they're scared, they're worried, they're going to be thinking, oh my God, my business is ruined. I'm going to lose so much money. I'm going to go out, no one's going to buy from me again. All these things are going to go through their heads. The truth is, most websites that get hacked, the companies don't go bust. If you think of all the large hacks you can think of, they haven't barely dented most of their bottom lines. And if you actually get hacked and handled it right, you can actually come out of it better off. Handling a hack well, being efficient and effective, and being transparent and good communication can actually leave you in a better position. Not that I'm suggesting you go and get yourself hacked, but can leave you in a better position than where you were before. Hopefully, this has given you some thought. The process I've gone through, it's all about getting it in the right operational order. Making sure we have all of our data available. When we reinstall, before we do that import, we make sure we have the upload folder accessible, web accessible, because that re-imports all the images and reassociates stuff. But the only way to be sure you've got rid of a hack, boom, is to destroy it all. There are not lots of analogies, but they're all scary, and I promise this wasn't a scary talk. So I hope you never have to use this talk. If you do use it, don't go halfway in. Do all of the process. Burn everything. Rebuild. My name's Tim. I say you can get me in all the usual places, and I'm available for hire because, yeah, that's a thing I'm meant to do now that I'm a freelancer.
Tim, thank you so much. I'm really, really pleased that it wasn't scary. It was a really practical, a great look at how we can practically use these tools to help support this process. So thank you very much. I found your talks always fascinating because I often come away thinking the issue is always the soft squidgy bit that sits in front of the screen rather than any of the technology, and it's one of the regular takeaways that I take from your talk. So thank you.
Humans, the web would work a lot better if we got rid of them.
On that point, before we go to the questions, but one from my side is: do you think WordPress itself is doing enough to make sure that this doesn't that the human element, two-factor authentication, whatever you want to say, don't allowing loose passwords, etc., is good enough in your experience? You've been in this field for a lot longer than many of us.
Good enough? No, of course it's not. We can argue all day long. Everything should be better. There should be. We should raise the barrier continually higher and higher and higher. The problem with raising the barrier higher and higher is that comes at the expense of a user experience and just being able to use stuff. At the moment, we're at a balancing point where someone can still use the software without needing to understand a lot of the security implications that are going around it. For example, when you go and try to create a password now, it's really difficult to put your own password in. It automatically generates it, and it's all like, and it automatically generates a pretty strong, reasonable password. With the assumption that the browser is now, most people are going to be asked by their browser, do they want to save this password? At minimum, if not having a password manager. So there are lots of little steps like that have improved. I would love to see the 2-factor feature plugin that's been a feature plugin for a very long time get into core. I think that's the next big thing for us, really, from a user's perspective. But it's also not necessarily just WordPress, the core team, or anybody's specific remit to do this. Everybody has to take responsibility. And if we can, the big thing we don't have at the moment is that I've been doing these talks for 10, maybe 12 years. And I don't think we still aren't quite there with getting the basic education out. I still meet people who go, what do you mean that updating is important? And we've made that harder and easier at the same time, because we've made it harder in that every device that we know automatically updates. If you pick your phone up, it automatically updates. If you log on to your computer, chances are, obviously, there's a bunch of techies on the channel, so there's going to be a bunch of people going, I never let my computer automatically update. I'm not foolish. Whatever, real people, humans, have all of this automatically updating for them. We're only just getting to that stage now with WordPress, where we're letting it's built in to automatically update. So I feel actually the next generation of people who come and start their WordPress sites, who won't know better, in inverted commas, they're going to be a lot safer because of that. But yeah, at the moment, we still have our biggest problem is nothing to do with the systems and the processes. It's the education and the squishy humans. So if we can keep educating people, I think that will have more impact than any code we can ever put into WordPress core.
Okay. We had a good question here from Elliot, just asking, most hacks go unnoticed. Do you have any recommendations for early warnings, so that you get? And I think we're all. You said it in the talk. It's not. It was like fine yesterday, but it could have been. Who knows when? Who knows when yesterday was? Yeah.
So there are some warning signs that you can normally spot. Getting some sort of file integrity monitor now tool. So I mentioned WordFence, the one. There's a couple of others. WP Fingerprint is another one. And there are a few non-WordPress specific tools. And these basically check whether the files have changed in some way, or ideally check against a known good source, i.e. WordPress.org or some library somewhere, and say, hey, that file doesn't match the file over here, and that's probably bad because we didn't change that. There's more fancy stuff called intrusion detection systems. These are actually things that maybe your host might actually be running, but they might not be necessarily giving you instant access to, but they might share it in the form of, hey, these files, we've seen these new files added, or we've seen these new files changed. And those that sort of information is really useful. Having a good user activity monitor is really handy. So something like Stream or Activity Monitor, White Hat Security do one that I can't remember. WP White Hat Security up in Scotland. And that basically just says, user X logged in, user X installed plugin, user X did this. They're really handy because obviously you can then go, well, that's weird because Bob's off sick. what's he doing installing the plugin called Hack My Site? That feels like a bad thing. I have a plugin called WP User Sentry, which does something very similar to a lot of the security plugins in that whenever you log in, it will send you an email that says, "Hi, you've just logged in," which sounds really pointless. Why would I care when I've logged in? Surely, but it's when you get that and go, well, hang on a minute, I didn't just log in. Oh, foo. So those sort of tools are really useful, and they'll give you some signs. Your site going really slow. That's normally a good indicator, especially if you then look at your access logs. And I'd encourage everybody to know where your access logs are and sort of understand how to read them. Because when you open an access log for the first time, you're going to go, there's lots of lines and it doesn't make sense. But you can quite quickly start to understand them. And if you're seeing repeated hits to strange places and they're getting 200 responses, that's normally a bad sign. If you're seeing loads and loads of 404s and 403 error requests, you can sort of be going, that's a bot that keeps hitting me. Maybe that's just using my resources up. Damn sustainability, we're going to be dooming the environment. Let's go block them. But if you start to see that they're getting 200 responses to their post requests, then you're there going, hang on a minute, I might go and look at that file and see what on earth that's actually doing. And the final way is that you'll be surprised how quickly a host will tell you. Unfortunately, they'll do it in one of two ways, either nicely via email or via the big screen that appears to every user that says, we've taken this site offline. If you're the administrator, please contact us.
Yeah.
I mean, most hosts will actually detect that not through any particular activity monitoring bits. They're going to spot that through their mail logs. They'll just, because once your site starts to send out a load of Viagra spam, and they'll have some sort of spam monitoring on there, or they'll just have a flood warning that says, this site has just sent out 60,000 emails. That's weird. And so it's normally the email system that for the hosts they'll notice quicker than perhaps anything else, because anything else they might look at and go, oh, that's just traffic. When they see email, they know that that's weird, that's not right, and so they'll block it straight away, or hopefully will have limited it right at the start, and they'll get in touch with you. So there are various early warnings. You don't really want the host one. That's a bad early warning, I guess. And the worst scenario is you go to your site one day and go, why is Google saying that I'm being blocked from malware? That is the doomsday scenario, because it could take anything up to 6 months to fix. That's the one we want to avoid. So if we not be in the state where Google has managed to crawl your site and found something that it thinks is malware and put you in the bad browsing list, that would be ideal. Because if we're in there, it takes a very long time to get out, and you have to do a lot of lying, because you genuinely have to. The only way you're going to get out of it is to say, yes, I promise I found every piece of malware and I have scoured every file ever existing since the beginning of time, I promise. Because if you say, no, I deleted it, they'll go, did you delete all of it? It's like, how can I answer that question?
False positive.
Well, you can, because you deleted your entire server, which would be is the correct. So if you've got if you're in that scenario, actually deleting the entire server works really effectively, because you can say, I deleted the server, and we rebuilt. And they might not let you back in. Then they might still ask you questions.
We've had a question from Alan in relation to API keys and the challenges that these can present. So you could have given away your keys to MailChimp or whatever.
I mean, I would assume anything on the server has been compromised. There is some good news and some bad news scenario. Your API key will have been exposed. Let's just assume that it's been exposed. So we will fix it, and we will change it, and we will do whatever we can. Particularly with payment gateways, this becomes more serious. But let's assume we're going to go into our happy place, and it's not an e-commerce site. And we just got a MailChimp API key. The good news scenario is that almost certainly the attacker wasn't going for our API key. They probably don't know they even could access it. They're more likely to be using your site to hit another site, to send out mail, to do all the things that automated attacks do. Now, if it was slightly targeted, that's different. Particularly if you are in a more vulnerable sort of group. So if you run any site for the NHS, any sort of site which might attract someone who would be deliberately targeting, then we have more issues. Then we start worrying about, well, what API keys? A really good example, which the Panama Papers is one, is that a site which has SMTP credentials, so the ability to send email as a user on the SMTP server. If, let's say, you're using Outlook, those login details will be your domain login details for your pretty much everything, because it's just a Windows user. Now, once you're in that scenario, you've suddenly got someone's username and password of a real person, chances are, unless someone in IT actually set it up. But nobody in IT set it up because it was a WordPress website. And they don't do WordPress because they are a Microsoft outfit. And so they didn't do that. They just told marketing that they could have a WordPress site and shoved it up. So it's likely to be the head of marketing's username and password. And that should get you pivoted into their systems nicely. But that requires someone to know enough about the business to be going and hunting, or to be just searching and looking. So yes, you should always rotate all keys where possible, but the reality is it's unlikely someone is targeting you. And so I'm not saying you don't have to rush to it, but it would be lower on my list of worries more than other things. But still, go change your keys. And the good news about API keys over, say, a username and password in an SMTP plugin is that they are fairly easy to change, and you can revoke them very quickly. And you should be able to see when it's revoked. You can just get a new one assigned. So hopefully the system's good.
We're running out of time fast, but a quick one for you, Tim. At what point do you think you should just throw in the towel and call in the experts?
Well, I want to get paid, so now, sure, let's do that. Practically, I think that most people can do what I've described. It's a process. There are a couple of times you might want to bring in someone outside. One, if it keeps happening, because clearly you haven't found it, or something has gone wrong with your process. And two, if you're too emotionally invested in the whole thing, that the idea, if I came up to you and said, I'm going to just blow up your site, literally, I'm going to take it off the internet and rebuild it, and you react with abject horror and say, no, you can't do that because we need X, Y, and Z and Q, and that's the time to bring in the experts, because the route I've described works, I say 9.5 times out of 10. You can hybrid this with the forensics route if you know what you're doing. But you can get lax too quickly and start putting files back. And do you know how most sites get rehacked? It's because they actually, having done this process, I've seen sites rehacked. It's very annoying. When I go and look, it's because they went, yeah, but that plugin that we didn't have a license for, and they've gone out of business, but it really did what we needed to do. So we've just re-uploaded it and it gets rehacked again. But yeah, if it's repeatedly happening, chances are you've not found what you need to find. Might be time to call in an expert. If you've got too much emotional investment in it, the idea of destroying everything and rebuilding is too much, then it's probably a good time to bring someone in, because they can talk through other options / do it for you, and therefore you don't have that scariness.
And taking it the other way, looking at it from another perspective of before it happens, do you think there is a bar where you say, actually, this site is too important, you should be hosting with somebody who actually looks after it and does it? And is there a level you see that it's like, do you know what? Don't make this your problem, even from the beginning. Start with someone else. Where would you say that comes in?
I feel we've got a middle layer, to be honest, because there's at the bottom, you've got it's just my site. It's okay if it goes wrong, it's fine. Then we go into that sort of middle layer where I do not have the expertise to fix this. I just should get it looked after by someone. And I think that's very low. I think that bar is right down the bottom. I used to work for a hosting company. I know that their hack site policy works really well. and it's very efficient. I wonder what it might be. So I know, so going to a good hosting company and getting them to handle it, but you need to make sure that they will handle it, because most middle range hosts, and even a lot of the WordPress managed hosts, will go, yeah, we'll turn it off and ignore it, or we will we'll just delete the malware and leave it. So you need to find one who will hold your hand and handle it properly. But then we sort of peak out at the top, where it can't be the host's problem alone. And that's where we probably have our own internal team, or we're hiring consultants that are literally on hand to go fix. And right at the top end, for the vast majority of people, get a good managed host, hope that they've got a good security policy, ask them about it. It's a good sales question. How do you fix hacked sites? If they say we don't, alarm bells. If they say we what do you mean? We charge you 150 quid and do this. And if they do charge, that might not be a bad thing, but you need to know exactly. You want to know the process that they're going to take, because you want to be able to see whether or not it's going to work for your instances. A lot of hosting companies will just simply restore the backup as their solution.
Yeah, and as you say,
I think
that
of all of
already
our
has the
routes,
problem.
that's the worst answer, because you will just be hacked tomorrow.
Well, Tim, thank you. I'm afraid we have run out of time, but again, as always, so much there. A lot of advice and a lot of practical stuff that we can start to implement and start to. We need to be prepared, don't we? That all this stuff, it's all well and good having this knowledge, but then never doing anything until you hit that critical moment of, oh, site's now been hacked and now I need to figure out how to get it back online. It's often too late, isn't it? You're in that emotional state.
Can I leave one last thing?
Of course.
Write a disaster plan. I know it sounds silly, and I genuinely mean it. Write out a disaster plan that says who's going to be in charge, what you're going to do, what happens, who you need to communicate with, and how now. The more planning you do now, the easier it will be. And just like any insurance and disaster planning policy documents that you ever write, they're never going to work, but you're never going to need to use them. If you write something out, then and I have proof of this, because I wrote out Coding Futures, my original development company's original alien invasion plan, and it was very detailed, and we wrote it out, and no alien invasion has happened. On the same basis, we wrote out our hack site plans.
Amazing.
So get a plan in place, and then you can go with confidence into it until you discover that your plan was rubbish. But the next plan is going to be brilliant.
I hope you didn't write a global pandemic policy, did you?
No, I skipped that one.
You skipped that one. Oh well. We can't next year. Try for that for next year.
Time.
Yeah, I have a zombie apocalypse plan. Me and my friends have worked over the years. We have a zombie apocalypse plan between there's about 4 of us, and we know exactly what we're doing. But this apocalypse,
and I think we've now got this. Probably we're getting to the social point now.
Tim, thank you. Really appreciate you giving us time. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Always a pleasure to have you. And if you're able to, it'd be fantastic to have you join us in the social afterwards. But appreciate you've obviously just given a lot of time for your talk. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
Cheers,
Thanks, Tim.
Bye.
Take care. Excellent. Well, I think and I hope everybody can agree we've had 2 incredible talks tonight covering 2 really important subject matters. Very, very different in their scope, very different in their approach. So big thank you to both Tim and Tom for giving their time this evening. And I know it's been interesting watching through the chat that Tim, Tom, Tim.
Yeah. At least they're not the flower pot men, so that's fine.
It's been excellent. Thank you all. And again, Paul, Diane, Leo, thank you so much for giving your time this evening as well. Also want to say thank you. Final thank you to our sponsors, Automatic, Cloudways, Funnel Packs, Weglot, Winning WP, and Yoast for supporting Big Orange Heart and enabling us to deliver these events. Again, if you haven't really would appreciate it if you could thank our sponsors, big.ht/thanks. We're continually looking for your feedback. We mentioned at the start of the event the fact that we're now a year into delivering these virtual events. We'd love to hear what you think. We'd love to hear, does the format work for you? Does the structure work for you? Again, even if you've got some thoughts on, as we move forward into coming back to in-person, how do we incorporate both the in-person and the virtual events? If you have any thoughts on those, that's a great place to let us know about them. Next event will be taking place 25th of March. How are we possibly talking about the end of the first quarter of 2021 already? It's incredible. But yes, 25th of March will be the next event. If you can join us, we'd love to have you with us. It will be a virtual event as we continue on. We've said for the first, at least the first half of 2021, all our events will be virtual. We'll obviously keep you updated on that as we move forward. We're going to head over to the social now. If you're on live.bigorangeheart.org, click on the social link at the top. We're going to spin up some tables in there. Feel free to start a table, join a table. We're going to move around, have various conversations. If Tom and Tim are there with us, we can obviously continue some of the questions that we had. There were a lot of questions that were asked tonight that unfortunately we haven't had an opportunity to get to. So thank you all for raising those. If you've taken away any value from tonight, if these kinds of events have value for you, we would really appreciate any kind of donation that you can make into Big Orange Heart, big.ht/give. $10 a month makes a huge difference. Every single penny counts. Every single penny helps go towards us delivering wellbeing and mental health support into the remote working communities. Oh, we don't want that one. I just want to say a big thank you. As I said, Diane, Paul, Leo, really appreciate you giving your time this evening. It's always a pleasure to be on the end of the month. Always look forward to coming together with you and doing this.
Thank you. It was lovely to be here.
It's been a good, something enjoyable every month that we till we get back in the room.
Absolutely,
absolutely, definitely.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I guess that's a wrap. As they say, we'll head over to the social and we'll continue some conversations over there.
Sounds good.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.